The Laowa 7.5mm is currently the widest rectilinear lens available for micro four thirds. Its extremely wide angle of view and fast f2 aperture make it appealing for a variety of genres, so let's see how well it performs. The first thing that strikes you about the lens, and what took us aback when we first saw it at Photokina, is just how small, light, and compact it is. Though we mostly used it on the Panasonic GX85 during our testing period, there's no reason you couldn't mount it on even the smallest of micro four thirds cameras. Because it's so small and wide, it's also important to avoid placing your fingers too close to the front element. Otherwise, they might just end up in the frame as they did in this example you're seeing now. Although it lacks weather sealing, we really appreciated the build quality of the Laowa. Both the barrel and the lens hood are made of metal, and the focus and aperture rings are very pleasant to use thanks to their good resistance and ridged design. Marked along the barrel are the various aperture values and a distance scale, both of which are very accurate. The clicking aperture ring is useful for still photography, but less appealing for video work because you can't carry out smooth manual aperture changes. It turns in full aperture stops rather than half or 1/3 stops. I also find that f16 and f22 have been placed a little too close together, but most photographers will avoid these values anyway. Because the lens doesn't transmit EXIF data to the camera, you have to keep note of the values. It comes with a 46mm filter thread and a removable petal-shaped lens hood. When the lens was announced, Laowa promised both good optical quality and very little distortion, so let's see if this is the case. Looking at the center sharpness of a set of images taken close to infinity, we can see that the results are excellent. The best performance occurs at around f4, though f2.8 and f5.6 are admittedly quite close. Evidence of diffraction begins to surface at around f8, but the lens remains usable up to f11. The fastest aperture of f2 is a little softer than f2.8, but it's still good. Moving to a closer distance of around 1 meter, the results are more or less identical. f4 is once again the sharpest, while f2.8 and f5.6 are only slightly softer. Though f2 is softer than f2.8 once again, it's still very usable. The corner sharpness is just as impressive. It's already very sharp at f2 and f2.8, and the performance improves as you stop down. When used for astrophotography, the lens suffers from some slight astigmatism at the fastest aperture, but by f2.8 the results are almost perfect, even in the extreme corners. A characteristic of this lens I thoroughly enjoyed was its minimum focus distance of 12 centimeters. When used with the fastest apertures, you can achieve a good amount of shallow depth of field and a decent bokeh with the right background. Vignetting is visible up until around f5.6, but it's only invasive at f2 and f2.8. Some chromatic aberration can appear at the edges and in the corners at the fastest apertures. There's also some barrel distortion, but this is common on lenses with an ultra-wide focal length. The most annoying issue I had to deal with was flare. It occurs in any situation where a strong light source is present, both indoors and out, and it can be quite invasive for astrophotography if there's an artificial light in your scene, such as a street lamp. However, it does produce some fairly nice sun stars at the slowest aperture values. The Laowa 7.5mm is one of the most unique offerings within the micro four thirds range due to its extreme wide angle, fast maximum aperture, and highly compact design. Apart from flare, there isn't much to complain about. Sharpness is excellent, and it's also a very good option for astrophotography since there's only some slight astigmatism in the extreme corners at f2. Were I an avid landscape, architectural, or aerial photographer, I wouldn't think twice about adding it to my collection.